The rain fell like needles against my skin, cold and relentless, turning the Chicago streets into a blur of neon and darkness. I stood outside the diner where I'd worked for 3 years, my apron still tied around my waist, my fingers clutching the crumpled termination notice that had been shoved into my hands 20 minutes ago. Budget cuts, they'd said, as if those 2 words could explain away the rent I couldn't pay, the electricity bill sitting unopened on my kitchen counter, the empty refrigerator waiting at home. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't need to look to know it was another collection agency. The medical bills from my mother's hospital stay last year had become a second shadow, following me everywhere, demanding payment I couldn't give. I should have walked to the bus stop. Should have gone home to my studio apartment in Pilsen where the radiator clanked and the neighbors fought through paper-thin walls. But something kept me frozen on that corner, rain soaking through my uniform, mascara I couldn't afford to replace running down my cheeks. The street was nearly empty, just a few cars passing, their headlights cutting through the downpour. I closed my eyes, trying to remember when things had started to fall apart. Was it when Mom got sick? When Dad left? Or had I always been drowning, just too stubborn to admit it? You're going to catch pneumonia standing there like that. The voice cut through the rain, deep and smooth, with an edge that made my eyes snap open. A black car idled at the curb. Not just any car, a Mercedes, the kind that cost more than I'd make in 5 years. The rear window had rolled down, and a man looked out at me with eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the streetlight. He was probably in his mid-30s, with sharp features that suggested Mediterranean heritage. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, and even through the rain, I could see the gleam of an expensive watch on his wrist. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice cracking on the last word. His gaze moved from my face to the termination notice clutched in my hand, then back to my eyes. Something flickered in his expression. Not pity, exactly. Recognition, maybe. Like he'd once stood in the rain, too, even if his rain had fallen in a different world. "No," he said quietly. "You're not." The car door opened. He stepped out, and I noticed he moved with the kind of confidence that came from never having to question whether he belonged somewhere. The rain hit his shoulders, darkening the fabric of his suit, but he didn't seem to care. He shrugged off his coat. Cashmere, I realized, catching the scent of expensive cologne and rain, and held it out to me. "I don't need charity," I said, even as my teeth started to chatter. "It's not charity." His accent was subtle, just a hint of Italian in certain syllables. "It's practical. You're soaked, it's 40 degrees, and you're standing on a corner in Greektown at 11 at night. So this neighborhood isn't safe at this hour." He took a step closer, still holding the coat. "Especially not for someone who looks like they've lost everything." The words hit harder than they should have. Maybe because they were true. Maybe because he'd said them without judgment, just stating a fact the way someone might comment on the weather. I took the coat. It was warm, impossibly soft, and smelled like cedar and something darker. Tobacco, maybe, or whiskey. I pulled it around my shoulders, and for the first time in hours, I stopped shivering. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded, then tilted his head slightly, studying me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "What's your name?" "Emma." I hadn't planned to tell him. The word just slipped out. "Emma." He repeated it like he was testing how it sounded. "I'm Dante." A name that fit him perfectly. Strong, old world, carrying weight. "You live nearby?" he asked. I hesitated. Every instinct told me not to answer, not to give this stranger any information about myself. But there was something about the way he looked at me. Not like I was a problem to be solved, but like I was a person worth seeing. "Pilsen," I finally said. "About 3 miles south." "That's a long walk in the rain." I'll take the bus. The last bus left 10 minutes ago. I blinked, pulling out my phone to check the time. 11:17 p.m. He was right. I'd missed it. Dante's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. Come with me. My heart jumped into my throat. What? I'll drive you home. It's not safe to walk, and you'll freeze before you get halfway there. I don't know you. No, he agreed. You don't. But you know that coat you're wearing cost $4,000, which means I'm not trying to rob you. And if I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't have offered to help. The logic was sound, even if it made my stomach twist. I looked at him, really looked, trying to read his intentions in the set of his jaw, the steady way he held my gaze. Why would you do this? I asked. Help a stranger? Something crossed his face. A shadow, gone too quickly to name. Because someone helped me once, when I needed it. The rain was falling harder now, turning the street into a river. I thought about walking home in this. Arriving at my apartment shaking and sick, spending money I didn't have on cold medicine. Okay, I heard myself say. Dante gestured toward the car, and the driver, a large man in a dark suit, opened the rear door. I climbed in, sinking into leather seats that felt like butter. The warmth was immediate, wrapping around me like a blanket. Dante slid in beside me, maintaining a careful distance. He pulled the door shut, and suddenly we were cocooned in silence, the rain reduced to a gentle drumming on the roof. Where in Pilsen? He asked. I gave him the address, watching his face for judgment. The neighborhood wasn't the worst in Chicago, but it wasn't good either. Most people with cars like this wouldn't drive through it in daylight, let alone at night. But Dante just nodded and spoke to the driver in rapid Italian. The car pulled away from the curb, smooth and silent. I sat there, wrapped in his coat, trying not to think about how this felt like stepping into a different world. The coat smelled like him, warm and expensive, and every breath reminded me of the distance between his life and mine. You worked at that diner long. Dante's voice pulled me from my thoughts. 3 years. And they fired you? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Because of budget cuts. His tone suggested he didn't believe it. That's what they said. What's the real reason? I turned to look at him, surprised by the directness. Most people danced around unpleasant truths. The owner's nephew needed a job. I was the newest hire. Nepotism. He said it like a curse. One of the ugliest forms of power. Something in his voice made me think he'd seen plenty of ugly power in his life. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the city sliding past the windows. I watched the streets change, getting rougher the farther south we went. Dante didn't seem to notice or care. You have family in Chicago? He asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. My mother. She's in a nursing facility in Bridgeport. And your father? Gone. I didn't elaborate. The story of my father leaving when I was 16 wasn't something I shared with strangers, no matter how expensive their cars were. Dante nodded slowly. So you're alone. I manage. Clearly. There was no sarcasm in his voice, just observation. What will you do? For work? Find something else. There are always jobs if you're willing to work hard enough. Not always. He turned to face me fully, and in the dim light from passing street lamps, I could see his eyes more clearly. They were brown, almost black, with a depth that suggested he'd seen things I couldn't imagine. Sometimes hard work isn't enough. It has to be, I said quietly. It's all I have. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. You're stronger than you look. I have to be. The car slowed, pulling up in front of my building. The rain had eased to a drizzle, but the street was still slick and dark. I looked at the chipped concrete steps leading to the entrance, the broken security light that hadn't worked in months. I started to take off the coat. "Keep it," Dante said. "I can't." "Yes, you can." His tone left no room for argument. "Give me your phone." I blinked. "What?" "Your phone, please." Against my better judgment, I handed it to him. He typed something quickly, then handed it back. When I looked at the screen, there was a new contact. Dante. Just the name and a number. "If you need anything," he said, "call." "Why would I need anything from you?" "Maybe you won't. But if you do, call." He paused, then added more softly, "No one should have to stand alone in the rain, Emma." The way he said my name made my chest tighten, like it meant something, like I meant something. "Thank you," I whispered. "For the ride, for the coat, for—" I gestured vaguely, unable to put it into words. "For seeing you," he offered. "Yes," I wanted to say, because that's exactly what he'd done. In a city of millions, on a night when I'd felt invisible, this stranger had seen me. I opened the car door, stepping out into the cool night air. The coat hung heavy on my shoulders, still warm, still smelling like him. "Emma." I turned back. Dante was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Get inside, lock your door, and tomorrow when you wake up, remember that the rain doesn't last forever." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and walked toward my building. I didn't look back until I reached the entrance, but when I did, the car was still there, waiting, watching to make sure I got inside safely. Only when I'd closed the building door did I hear the Mercedes pull away. I climbed the 3 flights to my apartment, unlocked the door, and stepped into the familiar darkness. The coat was still around my shoulders, and I didn't take it off right away. Instead, I stood there in the quiet, breathing in the scent of cedar and rain and something I couldn't name. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Sleep well, Emma. Tomorrow is a new day." I saved the number, then finally took off the coat and hung it carefully on the back of my only chair. It looked out of place in my tiny apartment, like a piece of art in a thrift store. I should have felt afraid, should have questioned what had just happened, who Dante really was, why a man in a $4,000 coat was driving through Pilsen at midnight. But all I felt was warm, and for the first time in months, I believed that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow could be different. I woke the next morning to sunlight cutting through my blinds and the smell of my neighbor's cooking seeping through the walls. For a moment, I thought last night had been a dream. The rain, the stranger, the ride home in a car that cost more than my entire year's rent. Then I saw the coat hanging on my chair, and my heart stuttered. It had really happened. I reached for my phone, half expecting the number to be gone, some fever dream my exhausted mind had conjured. But it was there, Dante. And below it, the text from last night. I stared at it for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the message. What would I even say? Thank you again? What do you want from me? Who are you really? Before I could decide, my phone rang. Not Dante. Mrs. Chen from the nursing facility where my mother lived. "Miss Reeves, I'm calling about your mother's account. The payment for this month is past due, and I know." I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers against the bridge of my nose. "I lost my job yesterday. I just need a few days to—" "I understand, but we have policies. If the payment isn't received by Friday, we'll have to start looking at alternative arrangements." Alternative arrangements. A polite way of saying they'd move my mother to a state facility. The kind where patients sat in hallways and staff members were too overworked to care. "I'll have it," I said, even though I had no idea how. "I promise." The call ended, and I sat there in the silence of my apartment, doing math that wouldn't balance no matter how I arranged the numbers. Rent was due in a week. The nursing facility needed $1,200 by Friday. I had $317 in my checking account and a coat worth $4,000 that I couldn't possibly sell. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Dante. "Are you awake?" My fingers trembled slightly as I typed back. "Yes." 3 dots appeared immediately, then, "Have you had breakfast?" I looked at my empty refrigerator, at the single box of crackers in my cabinet. Not yet. "There's a cafe on 18th Street. Cafe Jumping Bean. Meet me there in an hour." I should have said no. Should have thanked him politely and deleted his number and sold the coat to a consignment shop. But I thought about the nursing facility bill, about my mother sitting in a room that smelled like antiseptic and old age, about the rain and the way Dante had looked at me like I was worth saving. "Okay," I typed. 53 minutes later, I walked into Cafe Jumping Bean, wearing the cleanest clothes I owned, jeans that fit well enough, and a sweater that hid how thin I'd gotten. The coat, Dante's coat, I'd left at home, folded carefully on my bed like a secret. He was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee and a view of the door. He'd changed clothes. Dark jeans now, a black sweater that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, but somehow he didn't look out of place. He looked alert, controlled, like someone who knew exactly where the exits were and who was watching. When he saw me, something in his expression softened. "Emma." "Hi." I slid into the seat across from him, hyper-aware of how normal this looked. Just 2 people having coffee. Nothing strange about it at all, except nothing about this was normal. "You didn't bring the coat," he observed. "I didn't want to get it dirty." A small smile touched his lips. "It's a coat. It's meant to be worn. Not by someone like me." The words came out before I could stop them, and I immediately regretted them. But Dante's expression didn't change to pity or dismissal. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. "Someone like you," he repeated slowly. "You mean someone who works hard? Who takes care of her mother? Who stands in the rain rather than give up?" My throat tightened. Someone who can't afford a $4,000 coat. "Money doesn't determine worth, Emma." He said it with such certainty that I almost believed him. I know plenty of people with money who are worth nothing. I picked up the coffee he'd ordered for me. A latte, perfect temperature, the kind I used to buy myself before everything fell apart. "Why am I here, Dante?" "Because I wanted to see you again." "Why?" He was quiet for a moment, his fingers wrapped around his own cup. "Because last night, I saw someone who reminded me of myself a long time ago. Someone fighting to stay standing when the whole world was trying to knock them down. And I thought maybe I could help. I wanted to ask what kind of help. Wanted to demand answers about who he was, what he wanted, whether this was some elaborate game. But looking at him in the morning light, I saw something in his face that stopped me, a tiredness around his eyes, a tension in his jaw that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy burdens. Whatever Dante was, he wasn't playing games. "I don't need charity," I said again, quieter this time. "I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a job." My heart jumped. What kind of job? I own several businesses in the city, restaurants, a few nightclubs, import-export. He spoke casually, but I caught the deliberate vagueness. "I need someone I can trust, someone smart, observant, and discreet." "You don't know me." "I know enough. You worked 3 years at a diner that underpaid you. You take care of your mother even when it costs you everything. You didn't steal my coat, even though you could have sold it for more money than you've probably seen in months." He paused. "You're honest. That's rare." "What would I have to do?" "Administrative work, mostly. Scheduling, bookkeeping, managing logistics. Some of it would be evening hours, but the pay is substantial. He named a number that made my breath catch. It was more than triple what I'd made at the diner. That's too much, I whispered. It's what the position is worth. He slid a business card across the table. Plain white, just a name, Dante Vega, and a phone number. Think about it. But Emma? His voice dropped lower. I need an answer by tomorrow. I picked up the card, running my thumb over the raised lettering. Everything about this felt too good to be true. Mysterious stranger. Sudden job offer. Money that would solve all my problems. What's the catch? I asked. The catch is that once you're in, you're in. My world isn't like the one you know. The work is legitimate, but the people I deal with aren't always. He searched for the word. Conventional. Are you asking me to do something illegal? No. I'm asking you to keep my books, schedule my meetings, and keep your mouth shut about what you see and hear. Nothing illegal. Nothing that would put you in danger. His eyes held mine. But I won't lie to you. My life is complicated. The people around me are complicated. If you work for me, you'll see things that might make you uncomfortable. What kind of things? The kind that require discretion and trust. He leaned back, giving me space. I'm not going to pressure you, but I am going to be honest. I saw you last night, and I saw someone I could use, but I also saw someone I wanted to help. Those two things don't have to be separate. I thought about my mother, about the bill due Friday, about the empty refrigerator and the final notices piling up. I thought about standing in the rain, feeling like I'd reached the end of everything. Can I ask you something? I said. Anything. Why do you really want to help me? Dante was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I'd heard it. Because 10 years ago I was standing in the rain too. Different city, different circumstances, but the same desperation. Someone gave me a chance when they didn't have to. Taught me that power is only worth having if you use it to protect the people who can't protect themselves. And that's what you do? Protect people? A shadow crossed his face. In my own way. Yes. There was something he wasn't saying. Layers beneath the surface I couldn't see yet. But looking at him across the table, I made a choice. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe I'd regret it. But I was tired of drowning and he was offering me a rope. Okay, I said. I'll do it. The relief in his expression was subtle but unmistakable. You'll start Monday. Come to this address at 9 a.m. He slid another card across the table, this one with an address in River North. Dress professionally, but don't buy anything new. What you're wearing is fine. I nodded, tucking both cards into my pocket. Emma. He waited until I met his eyes. You won't regret this. I hope not. We finished our coffee in companionable silence, and when it was time to leave, Dante walked me to the door. Outside, his Mercedes was waiting, the same driver from last night behind the wheel. Do you need a ride? Dante asked. I'm okay. I'm just going to walk around the neighborhood, clear my head. He nodded, but I saw the concern in his eyes. Be careful. I always am. As I watched him drive away, I pulled out my phone and called the nursing facility. This is Emma Reeves. I'll have my mother's payment by Friday. Mrs. Chen sounded surprised. Oh, good. We'll expect it then. I hung up and started walking, my mind spinning. I just accepted a job from a man I barely knew, doing work I didn't fully understand, in a world he'd admitted was complicated and unconventional. But my mother would be taken care of. My rent would be paid. I could buy groceries without counting every dollar. For the first time in a year, I could breathe. I just hoped I'd still be able to breathe when I learned what Dante's world really looked like. Monday morning arrived with surprising speed. I'd spent the weekend in a haze of anxiety and preparation, researching Dante Vega online and finding almost nothing. A few society page mentions, always in the background of photos from charity galas and restaurant openings. Never the focus, never the headline. A ghost in a three-piece suit. The address he'd given me led to a building in River North, all glass and steel, the kind of place where the doorman wore gloves and knew your name. I stood outside for a full minute, gathering courage. The lobby was marble and minimalism. I gave my name to the security desk, and within seconds, a young woman in an immaculate pantsuit appeared. "Miss Reeves? I'm Nicole, Mr. Vega's personal assistant. He's expecting you." I followed her to a private elevator that required a key card. We rode up in silence, and when the doors opened, I stepped into something that looked more like a luxury apartment than an office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago River. The furniture was modern and expensive, all clean lines and muted colors. But it was the man standing at the window who commanded attention. Dante turned when he heard us enter. He was in a suit today, navy blue with a crisp white shirt, and seeing him in his element made me realize how much he'd been holding back at the cafe. This was power, undiluted and unapologetic. "Emma." He crossed the room, and Nicole discreetly disappeared. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for the opportunity." He gestured to a seating area. "Coffee. Please." As he poured from a French press that probably cost more than my monthly rent, I took in the details of the room. Everything was pristine, carefully chosen, but there were no personal photos, no artwork that suggested individual taste. It felt like a stage set, beautiful but empty. "The work is straightforward," Dante said, handing me a cup. "I have 3 restaurants, 2 nightclubs, and an import business. You'll help Nicole coordinate schedules, manage bookings, track inventory. Most of the work happens on a computer, but occasionally I'll need you to visit the locations in person." "Okay." "You'll have access to financial records. You'll see how much money moves through these businesses. You'll meet people who work for me. Some of them aren't what you'd call conventional." He paused, making sure I was listening. "But you'll never be asked to do anything illegal, and you'll never be in physical danger. Those are my promises to you." "What if I see something that makes me uncomfortable?" "Then you tell me, immediately. I don't keep secrets from the people I trust, Emma, but I need the same from you." I met his gaze steadily. "You barely know me. How do you know you can trust me?" "Because you're here. Because you could have sold that coat and never called me again. Because when I asked you about your father, you said gone, instead of making up a comfortable lie." He set down his coffee. "People who've survived what you've survived don't waste energy on deception." The observation cut too close to truth. I shifted in my seat. "When do I start?" "Now, if you're ready. Nicole will show you the systems. You'll shadow her for the week, then start taking on responsibilities independently." He stood, and I realized the meeting was ending. But there was something I needed to know. "Dante?" He turned back. "What kind of people will I be working with?" A small, knowing smile touched his lips. "The kind who exist in the spaces between what's legal and what's right. The kind the law doesn't protect, so they protect themselves." He came closer, and his voice dropped. "Chicago isn't run by politicians, Emma. It's run by people who understand that power is the only currency that matters. I'm one of those people." My pulse quickened. "Are you saying you're—" "I'm saying I'm someone who takes care of his own, and as of today, you're one of mine." He reached out, adjusting the collar of my sweater with a gesture so casual it felt intimate. "No one will hurt you while you work for me. No one will threaten you, or pressure you, or make you stand alone in the rain again. Do you understand?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Good." He stepped back, the moment passing. "Nicole will take care of you. If you need anything, ask her. If you need me, call directly. He walked toward his office, and I watched him go, my mind reeling. I'd thought I understood what I was getting into. A job, good pay, some discretion required. But standing in that elegant office, feeling the weight of Dante's promise, "You're one of mine," I realized I'd just crossed a threshold I couldn't uncross. I'd entered Dante Vega's world. And somehow, I knew leaving it wouldn't be as simple as walking away. The first week passed in a blur of spreadsheets and scheduling software, learning names I'd never heard, and tracking money that moved in amounts I couldn't comprehend. Nicole was patient and thorough, showing me the systems that kept Dante's empire running smoothly. Because that's what it was, I realized. An empire. The restaurants were high-end, frequented by Chicago's elite. The nightclubs were exclusive, with waiting lists months long. The import business brought in wines and specialty foods from Italy, but I noticed that some shipments had notes that didn't quite add up. I didn't ask questions. Not yet. By Friday, I had my first paycheck. The amount made my hands shake, enough to cover my mother's nursing home for 2 months, my rent, my bills, and still have money left over. I stood in the bank, depositing the check, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Security. That evening, Dante called. "How was your first week?" "Overwhelming, but good." "Nicole says you're a fast learner." I could hear the smile in his voice. "Did you have dinner yet?" "No." "There's a restaurant I'd like you to see, one of mine. Can I pick you up in 30 minutes? I looked down at my worn jeans and faded t-shirt. "I'm not exactly dressed for—" "You're fine. I'll see you soon." He hung up before I could argue. 28 minutes later, the Mercedes pulled up outside my building. But this time, when I got in, Dante was alone. No driver, just him behind the wheel. "You drive?" I said stupidly. He laughed, and the sound was rich and unexpected. "Sometimes I like to." "Is that so surprising? Everything about you is surprising." The comment made him glance at me, something unreadable in his expression. Good. I'd hate to be boring. We drove north, toward the Loop, and pulled up in front of a restaurant I'd passed hundreds of times but never entered. Giordano's, not the pizza chain, but a different Giordano's, subtle and elegant, with windows of frosted glass, and a doorman who opened Dante's door before the car even stopped. "Mr. Vega. Welcome back." "Thank you, Marco." Inside was a different world. Soft lighting, tables spaced far enough apart for private conversation, the smell of garlic and wine, and something baking that made my stomach growl embarrassingly loud. Dante heard it and smiled. "When did you last eat?" "This morning. Toast." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That's going to change. We were led to a private table in the back, tucked into an alcove with a view of the kitchen. I watched chefs move with choreographed precision, flames leaping from pans, orders called out in Italian. "This is yours?" I asked. "For 5 years now. It's where I started." He poured wine into my glass. Red, deep as blood. "My first legitimate business." The word legitimate hung in the air. "And before that?" I asked carefully. Dante took a sip of his wine, studying me over the rim. "Before that, I did what I had to do to survive. Just like you." A waiter appeared with appetizers I hadn't ordered. Crispy arancini, prosciutto-wrapped figs, burrata so fresh it gleamed. I stared at the spread. "I can't afford—" "You're not paying. You're my employee, Emma. When you're with me, you're taken care of." He served some of each onto my plate. "Eat." I did, and the flavors were incredible. Rich and complex, each bite better than the last. I'd been surviving on crackers and instant noodles for so long I'd forgotten what real food tasted like. Dante watched me eat with an expression I couldn't quite name. Satisfaction, maybe. Or something deeper. "Tell me about your mother," he said. The question caught me mid-bite. I swallowed carefully. "What do you want to know?" "Why is she in a facility?" "Early onset Alzheimer's. She was diagnosed 3 years ago. By last year, she couldn't live alone safely anymore." I set down my fork. "The state facilities have waiting lists, and I couldn't put her somewhere like that." "So you've been paying for private care?" "Yes." "While working at a diner." I managed. "You shouldn't have had to manage alone." His voice was quiet but firm. "Does she have any other family?" "Just me. My father left when I was 16. No siblings, no aunts or uncles worth mentioning." Dante nodded slowly, processing. "And what about you? What do you do when you're not working or visiting your mother?" The question made me realize how empty my answer would be. Nothing, really. I read sometimes. Old books from the library." "What kind of books?" "Anything. Right now I'm reading Wuthering Heights." Something sparked in his eyes. "The kind of love that destroys you. You've read it?" "A long time ago." He leaned back in his chair. "I prefer Dante's Inferno. At least there, the circles of hell are clearly marked." I smiled despite myself. "Is that what this is? A circle of hell?" "Some days." But he was smiling too, and it transformed his face, making him look younger, less burdened. But not tonight. The main course arrived. Handmade pasta with a sauce that tasted like summer, bread still warm from the oven, vegetables roasted until they caramelized. We ate and talked, and I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't in months. Dante told me about growing up in a small village in southern Italy, about coming to America at 20 with nothing but ambition and anger. He didn't specify what he'd been angry at, but I heard it in his voice, the kind of rage that came from being overlooked, underestimated, pushed down. "And now?" I asked. "Now, you're the one with the power." "Yes." He didn't sound triumphant. "But power is just another form of weight, Emma. The more you have, the more you carry. You could let some of it go. I could. But then, who would protect the people who depend on me?" It was the same theme from before: protection, loyalty, taking care of his own. I wondered what had happened to make that so central to his identity. By the time dessert came, tiramisu that melted on my tongue. I'd almost forgotten this wasn't a date. Almost forgotten that Dante was my employer. That I was sitting in his restaurant eating food I could never afford, wearing clothes that cost less than the wine in my glass. Almost. "Emma." Dante's voice pulled me back. "I want you to know something." I looked up, meeting his dark eyes. "What you see in my world, the people you meet, the money that moves, it stays between us. Not because I don't trust you, but because trust is the only thing that keeps anyone safe in this life." He reached across the table, his hand hovering near mine but not quite touching. "If anyone ever makes you uncomfortable, if you ever feel unsafe, you tell me immediately. Do you understand?" "Yes." "I mean it. I don't care if it's someone I've known for 20 years or someone I just hired. If they cross a line with you, I need to know." The intensity in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. "Has that happened before?" "Once." His expression darkened. "It won't happen again." I didn't ask what he'd done. Something in his eyes told me I didn't want to know. We left the restaurant an hour later, full and warm despite the cool October air. Dante drove me home in comfortable silence, and when we pulled up to my building, he turned to me. "Next week will be busier. One of the nightclubs is hosting a private event. You'll need to be there." "What kind of event?" "The kind where Chicago's elite come to pretend they're not as corrupt as the people they condemn." A wry smile. "Wear something nice. Nicole will help you find something appropriate." I don't... It's part of the job, Emma. Consider it a uniform. He studied my face. Unless you're uncomfortable. I thought about it. Thought about standing in a room full of powerful people, watching Dante move through his world. No, I'm not uncomfortable. Good. He reached over, brushing a strand of hair from my face in a gesture so natural, it felt like he'd done it 100 times before. Get some rest. I'll see you Monday. I got out of the car, my skin still tingling where his fingers had touched. When I reached my apartment, I stood at the window and watched the Mercedes drive away, its taillights disappearing into the Chicago night. Something was shifting between us. Something that had nothing to do with employment or obligation. I could feel it in the way he looked at me, in the careful distance he maintained even as his words drew closer. I should have been worried. Should have recognized the danger in getting emotionally involved with someone like Dante Vega. But standing there in the dark, I realized I'd already crossed that line too. The question was whether I'd survive the fall. The nightclub was called Inferno, which seemed both appropriate and too on the nose. It occupied 3 floors of a renovated warehouse in the West Loop, and by the time I arrived at 8 p.m., there was already a line around the block. But I didn't use the front entrance. Nicole had texted me earlier with instructions. Back door. Tell Marco you're with Dante. I found the alley entrance, where the same Marco from the restaurant stood with an earpiece and a subtle bulge under his jacket that suggested a weapon. Miss Reeves. He opened the door for me. Mr. Vega is expecting you. 3rd floor. Inside, the music hit like a physical force, deep bass that vibrated through my chest. Lights that strobed and pulsed in rhythm. The 1st floor was packed with bodies moving in the semi-darkness, but I followed the signs to a private elevator. The 3rd floor was different. Quieter, more exclusive. The music was still present but muted, filtered through expensive sound systems into something sultry rather than overwhelming. The crowd here was older, better dressed, moving with the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to prove anything. And there, in the center of it all, was Dante. He stood with 3 men, all of them in suits, all of them listening intently as he spoke. Even from across the room, I could feel the power dynamic. They weren't his equals. They were supplicants, seeking favor or permission or something only he could give. Then his eyes found me, and everything else seemed to fade. He excused himself from the group and crossed the room in long, deliberate strides. Emma, you came. You told me to. I asked. There's a difference. He took in my appearance. The black dress Nicole had helped me pick out, simple but well cut. The heels that made me tall enough to almost meet his eyes. You look beautiful. The compliment caught me off guard. Thank you. Come, there are people you should meet. He placed his hand on the small of my back, guiding me through the crowd. His touch was light but possessive, a subtle signal to everyone watching that I was with him, under his protection. We stopped at a table where a woman sat surrounded by younger men, all of them trying too hard to impress her. She was maybe 60, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. Rosa. Dante's voice warmed. I want you to meet Emma Reeves. She's working with me now. Rosa's gaze sharpened, assessing me in seconds. The girl from the rain. My eyes widened. She knew. Yes, Dante confirmed. Smart. Rosa smiled, and it was genuine. He needs someone who understands what it means to survive. Welcome, Emma. We moved on, and Dante introduced me to more people. Restaurant owners, city officials, a judge who greeted him like an old friend. Each introduction was carefully choreographed, each conversation a dance of information and power. I watched Dante navigate it all with practiced ease, his hand never leaving my back, his attention returning to me between conversations like I was the anchor in a shifting sea. By midnight, my head was spinning. I'd learned more about Chicago's power structure in 4 hours than most people learned in a lifetime. I'd seen money change hands, seen favors promised and debts collected, seen the machinery that kept the city running beneath its official surface. And I'd seen how central Dante was to all of it. When the crowd finally thinned, he led me to a private balcony overlooking the city. The cool air was a relief after the heat of the club. "You did well tonight," he said. I just stood there and smiled. "You observed. You remembered names. You didn't ask stupid questions." He turned to face me. "That's more valuable than you know." I looked out at the lights of Chicago, spreading to the horizon. "This is your world. Part of it. And what's the other part?" He was quiet for a long moment. "The part I keep hidden. The part that keeps this part running." I turned to him, brave with wine and exhaustion. "The illegal part. The necessary part." He stepped closer, and I could smell his cologne, feel the heat of him in the cool air. "I'm not a good man, Emma. I've done things that would make you walk away if you knew. But I protect what's mine, and I keep my promises. Always." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know what you're involved in. Because if you're going to work for me, you need to understand that my world has rules that don't appear in any law book." His hand came up, cupping my face with surprising gentleness. "And because I'm starting to care what you think of me." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Dante, I know this is complicated. I know I'm your employer, that there's a power imbalance, that this could end badly for both of us." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. "But I can't stop thinking about you standing in that rain. Can't stop wanting to make sure you never have to stand there again." I should have stepped back, should have reminded him of professional boundaries and appropriate workplace behavior. But instead, I leaned into his touch, my eyes closing for just a second. "What do you want from me?" I whispered. "The truth? Everything." He drew back, and I felt the loss of his warmth immediately. "But I'll settle for whatever you're willing to give." Before I could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted to something harder. "I have to take this. Stay here." He walked to the far end of the balcony, his voice dropping to rapid Italian. I couldn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. Anger, barely controlled, and underneath it, something that sounded like fear. When he returned, his face was a mask. "I need to handle something. Marco will take you home." "Is everything okay?" "It will be." He kissed my forehead, a gesture so unexpected it froze me in place. "I'll call you tomorrow." Then he was gone, disappearing back into the club with the kind of urgency that suggested whatever he was handling wasn't a simple business matter. Marco appeared at my elbow. "Miss Reeves, the car is ready." I let him lead me out, my mind replaying the last hour. Dante's hand on my face, his admission that he cared what I thought, the way he'd looked at me like I was something precious. And then the phone call, and the instant transformation back into someone dangerous. In the car, I touched my forehead where he'd kissed me, and wondered which version of Dante Vega was real. Maybe they both were. Maybe that was the problem. I didn't hear from Dante all weekend. By Monday, I was starting to wonder if Friday night had been a fever dream, if I'd somehow misread everything. Then Nicole appeared at my apartment at 7 a.m. with coffee and instructions. "We need to talk," she said, settling onto my worn couch like it was a throne. "About you and Dante." My stomach dropped. "There is no me and Dante. Emma." She gave me a look. "I've worked for him for 6 years. I've never seen him bring someone to Inferno and introduce them to Rosa. I've definitely never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you." "What way?" "Like you matter." She took a sip of her coffee. "Which means you need to understand some things." I sat down across from her, suddenly nervous. Okay. Dante Vega is one of the most powerful men in Chicago. He controls territory, money, and influence that most people can't even imagine. He's also loyal to a fault, protective of the people he cares about, and capable of extreme violence when those people are threatened. She held my gaze. Do you understand what I'm saying? He's dangerous. He's dangerous to his enemies. To the people he protects, he's the safest place in the world. She leaned forward. The question is, Emma, are you ready to be one of those people? I don't know what you're asking me. I'm asking if you're ready for what it means to be important to Dante, because once you cross that line, there's no going back. He doesn't do casual. He doesn't do halfway. If he decides you're his, then you're his. And that comes with protection, yes, but also with expectations. My mouth was dry. What kind of expectations? Loyalty, discretion, trust. She paused. And acceptance of who he really is. All of it. Not just the parts that fit comfortably into your worldview. I thought about Friday night. About the power I'd witnessed. The respect Dante commanded. About the phone call that had transformed him from tender to lethal in seconds. What if I'm not strong enough for this? Nicole smiled, and it was kind. Emma, you survived the last year alone, working yourself to exhaustion for a mother who doesn't even remember your name anymore. You're stronger than you think. She stood. But you need to decide what you want, because Dante is already decided about you. She left me sitting there, her words echoing in the quiet apartment. I spent the rest of the day at the office, diving into work, trying not to think about Nicole's warning. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, hoping it was Dante. It wasn't. Not until almost 6 p.m. when a text finally came through. Can you come to the restaurant? Same one from Friday, 8 p.m. I hesitated only a second before replying. Yes. This time, when I arrived, the restaurant was closed. The lights were dim, and there was only one table set, in the same alcove where we'd sat before. Dante was already there, and he looked exhausted. His jacket was off, his sleeves rolled up, and there was a tension in his shoulders that spoke of a weekend spent dealing with whatever crisis had pulled him away Friday night. Emma, he stood when I entered. Thank you for coming. Is everything okay? It is now. He pulled out my chair, and I sat, watching him move around the table to his own seat. I'm sorry I disappeared on you. You don't owe me an explanation. Yes, I do. He poured wine with hands that were perfectly steady, despite the tension I could see in his jaw. There was a situation. Someone thought they could operate in my territory without permission. I had to remind them why that was a bad idea. The words were deliberately vague, but the meaning was clear. Violence had been involved. Maybe worse. Did anyone get hurt? I asked quietly. Not anyone who didn't deserve it. He met my eyes. Does that bother you? I should have said yes. Should have been horrified by the casual way he referenced violence, by the implication that he'd been the one delivering it. But instead, I thought about all the times I'd been powerless. All the people who'd hurt me or taken advantage of me, and how there'd never been any consequence because I didn't have the power to enforce one. No, I said softly. It doesn't bother me. Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or vindication. Good, because I'm not going to lie to you about who I am, or what I do. If we're going to... He paused, searching for words. If this is going to be more than a professional relationship, you need to see all of it. And what is this? My voice was barely above a whisper. What's happening between us? Dante stood, coming around the table to where I sat. He pulled me to my feet, his hands gentle but firm on my arms. I don't know what to call it, he said. All I know is that I can't stop thinking about you. Can't stop wanting to make sure you're safe, that you're taken care of, that you never have to worry about money or safety or standing alone in the rain again. That's not love, Dante. That's protection. For me, they're the same thing. He lifted my hand, pressing it against his chest where I could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady. I don't know how to love without protecting. Don't know how to care about someone without making sure they're safe from everything that could hurt them. Even from yourself? He flinched, and I knew I'd struck close to truth. Especially from myself. I looked up at him, this powerful man who could command a room with a glance, who held Chicago's underworld in the palm of his hand. And I saw what Nicole had seen, someone who'd decided I mattered. I'm scared, I admitted. Of me? Of this. Of what it means. Of how much I want it even though I know I shouldn't. Dante's hands came up to frame my face, tilting it so I had to meet his eyes. Then be scared with me, because I'm terrified too. Terrified of how much power you already have over me, how much I'd burn down for you if anyone tried to hurt you. Dante. He kissed me. It was gentle at first, questioning, giving me space to pull away. But when I didn't, when I leaned into him instead, the kiss deepened into something that felt like falling and flying at the same time. His hands were in my hair, mine were clutching his shirt, and for a moment, the whole world narrowed to just this, his mouth on mine, his heartbeat against my palms, the certainty that I'd just crossed a line I could never uncross. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against mine. Stay with me tonight, he whispered, not for anything except this. Just stay. I knew what he was really asking. Not for sex, though the desire was palpable between us. He was asking me to choose his world, to accept what he was, to step fully into the life he was offering. Okay, I breathed. Yes. The relief in his eyes was overwhelming. He kissed me again, slower this time, savoring it, and when he pulled back, he was smiling. Come on, let me show you what it means to be mine. He took my hand and led me upstairs to an apartment I hadn't known existed above the restaurant. It was beautiful, exposed brick and tall windows, furniture that managed to be both modern and comfortable, a space that finally felt personal in a way his office never had. This is where you live? I asked. Sometimes, when I don't want to go home to an empty house. He pulled me onto a couch that faced the windows, the city lights spread out below us. It's where I come when I want to remember what I'm working for. And what's that? This. Peace. Moments where I'm not Dante Vega, head of the family, the man everyone fears. Moments where I can just be. Me. I curled into his side, his arm coming around me automatically. Who are you when you're just you? I'm still figuring that out. His fingers traced patterns on my shoulder. But with you, I think I'm getting closer. We stayed like that for hours, talking and not talking, learning the shape of each other. He told me about his childhood in Italy, about the father who'd beaten him and the mother who'd died trying to protect him, about coming to America with nothing and building an empire through intelligence, ruthlessness, and an unwavering code of loyalty. I told him about my mother before the Alzheimer's, about the father who'd abandoned us, about all the small humiliations of poverty that had shaped who I'd become. And slowly, piece by piece, we built something between us. Not quite trust yet, but the foundation of it. The possibility of it. When dawn started to lighten the sky, Dante kissed my forehead, that gesture again, and said, I'll take you home. But Emma? Yes? This weekend, pack a bag. You're moving in here. My eyes widened. What? You heard me. Your apartment isn't safe and I can't protect you there. Here, you're surrounded by my people. Here, I know you're safe. He saw my protest forming and cut it off. It's not a request. It's a condition of this, of us. I need to know you're protected. Part of me wanted to argue, to insist on my independence, but a bigger part, the part that was exhausted from years of struggling alone, wanted to say yes. Wanted to let someone else carry the weight for once. Okay, I whispered. This weekend. Dante's smile was worth every uncertainty. He drove me home as the city woke up around us, and when he left me at my door, he kissed me one more time, long and deep and full of promise. I'll see you at the office, he said. And Emma, thank you. For what? Ian, for staying in the rain long enough for me to find you. I watched him drive away, my lips still tingling from his kiss, my whole world transformed in a single night. I didn't know what came next. Didn't know if I could really live in Dante's world, with all its darkness and danger. But standing there in the morning light, I knew one thing for certain. I was willing to try. Because for the first time since my mother got sick, since my father left, since I'd started drowning in bills and exhaustion and despair, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. And if that meant walking into danger, accepting protection from a man who ruled Chicago's shadows, learning to love someone who showed love through power and loyalty and controlled violence, well, maybe I'd been looking for safety in all the wrong places. Maybe safety wasn't about avoiding danger. Maybe it was about finding someone who'd face it with you. And maybe, just maybe, I'd found that person in the last place I ever expected to look. In the eyes of a man who'd offered me his coat in the rain and asked me to come with him. I'd said yes then, and I was saying yes now. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. And somehow, that was enough.